Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We are back in the pub to answer your questions. It's the same lineup as it was last week, which was much fun. How are we this week? I'm feeling much better. No hangover today.
Yeah, no hangover today at all. I bonked my nose yesterday. So
what does that mean? You bonked your nose?
Like,
How?
I was doing pull-ups on a goalpost, and then when I came off, I just went boff, and it hurts a little bit, and so I found it sounded a little bit stuffy. But yeah, apart from that, all right.
Stay at this guy. How are you?
I'm fine. I haven't done anything ridiculous like that. I'm totally fine.
The voice seems to have improved a bit this week.
Yeah. Well, I was sick over the weekend again. I've been so ill for like 3 weeks, but now I'm fully recovered. I'm 100%.
I love it. All right, should we crack on with the show? Because last week we obviously did Sign or Swerve, and a lot of people in the comments were saying, do something similar, but for the best of the rest. For the rest of the teams in the league, I think people at home are getting a little bit tired of us talking exclusively about the Big Six or some of the biggest sides in Europe. So today, we're going to be looking at the other 14, is how I've described them.
They're doing quite a lot of interesting stuff.
Yes, they are doing a lot of interesting stuff. So we're going to be looking at every side in the Premier League that's not a Big Six team. Hopefully that will at least ease some of your appetites at home for some less well-known coverage. What we're going to do is look at their window, look at who they're linked with, maybe chat about one or two signings and say whether it's kind of a hit or a miss, what we think of it.
Yeah.
We'll start alphabetically then with Aston Villa, who've of course finished 14th last season. How do we think Stevie G got on since taking over? Are we happy with that appointment and how he's gone?
I think he had a good start. He had a decent start when he first took over. And I think towards the end of the season, people were maybe questioning him a bit more and some of his decisions towards games. I think so far, like the signings he's brought in, making Felipe Coutinho permanent
13 mil
for a pretty good price is really good. Bringing in Kamara
on a free,
like a strong bit of business.
That's a surprise transfer.
Whether
that's teams available in the market.
Oh, yeah, 100%. We were talking about him maybe going to like stuff like United and stuff like that. So that's like a really good bit of business. And so Carlos as well, like at the back. Like how long have we spoke about replacing Tyrone Mings though?
But does he replace Tyrone Mings? Const's out with a long-term injury. We're now talking potentially about seeing Tyrone Mings and Diego Carlos as a back two, which is the most reckless back two in Europe.
But it'll be massively helped by having Kamara there as a real defensive midfielder. The only real defensive midfielder they've had in the squad prior to this has been Nakamba, who, with all respect to him, is probably not quite Premier League level, or he's very low Premier League level.
And he had a bad injury, didn't he, as well last season?
Douglas Luiz, he sits deep, but he's not a defensive midfielder and never has been. So I think having Kamara there will make everyone behind them look a little bit more solid. And actually, I think Gerrard improved the team a lot. I think, like, you look at the results, and maybe it doesn't quite look that way, but you look at the underlying numbers and where they were before and where they were afterwards, and actually he turned them from a side that, on average, conceded more XG per game than they put up to a team that outperformed their opponents the majority of the time. And that may sound like, kind of like a ridiculous statsy take, but generally this has gone from a team which is worse than most of its opponents to a team that's better than most of its opponents. That's really good. These signings, I don't really like Diego Carlos, but the other two I think are excellent. The issue, I guess the one question with Gerrard is he lost his right-hand man, whose name eludes me right now.
Michael Beale.
Yeah, who's obviously like gone off now to become a first-team manager himself. And for a long time, he's been seen as kind of, I guess, like the brains of the operation to some degree. Yeah. So it will be a real test to see what Gerrard can do there. But I think that overall, this is strong stuff. I mean, Villa fans are always absolutely mental in our comments. Like, anytime you say anything remotely critical about them, they absolutely flip their shit. But, and they desperately have wanted to believe for the last 3 years that they've done, like, Champions League level business. But truly, I think they've done really good business. And I think they're solid.
Even the replacement of Michael Beale, Neil Critchley, I think is a really good appointment, smart appointment. I think a lot of Blackpool fans were very shocked to see him leave the club. He'd done a really good job there. They liked him. He's got an incredible pedigree of coaching, obviously. I remember initially seeing about Neil Critchley when he took charge of that Liverpool under-23s. Do you remember when they were off in Qatar playing the World Cup? Was it Club World Cup or something like that? Liverpool first team. Yeah. And they had to play like the youth teams. They were just like, right, just play the 23s. And Neil Critchley managed the Liverpool team that day. And I think since then, he's resume has only got stronger. So I'm pretty impressed by their ability to get him through the door so quickly after losing someone as crucial as Michael Beale.
Especially a first-team manager then becoming a part of the assistants
But that Michael Beale loss is a big one because he's been working with Gerrard for a long time now. Obviously, he's come from Rangers as well. I think that it is tough to lose your right-hand man, even if the replacement is quality, just the way you work day to day. I think Gerrard's a little bit more hands-off. Obviously, Michael Beale was very much the training ground guy. So let's see how they get on behind the scenes. But I agree. I think the business so far has definitely been a hit for me.
I mean, last season I was probably achieving with my predictions for Aston Villa.
Where did you have them? Above Arsenal?
Yeah, a bit too much.
Lost a lot of money
I got
there,
over the top. Yeah, I probably lost about 40 quid. But I think, so far this season's pretty good. What's also it'd be nice to hopefully see as well Leon Bailey come through this coming season. Like last year, we didn't really see that much of him. He was constantly injured or not getting picked. So maybe that could be like another signing. But yeah, overall, I think a hit so far in the transfer window.
It's really easy to see upside in them. Like Coutinho, full season, Bailey, fitter, Watkins, fitter, Buendia, fully integrated, actual defensive midfielder. It's really easy to see how this team is better next season. Yeah,
I totally agree. Let's talk about our first promoted side then, Bournemouth, who have come up. And I'm not going to lie, I fear for the promoted sides. I fear for the promoted sides this year. I really think the disparity between the top of the Championship and the bottom of the Premier League is growing season by season. I think the quality level of the lower end Premier League sides, take for instance Leeds or Southampton, who finished 15th, 16th, Leeds able to go out and bring in Rasmus Christensen and Brendan Aronson and Mark Rocker. I think that the disparity between that level side and Bournemouth, no offence to Bournemouth fans at home, I am unconvinced. Ryan Fredericks coming in as a free transfer, fine. I think he was a solid enough player at West Ham. Joe Rothwell will be a good signing. But again, is he that Premier League proven quality? No, obviously, very good season last year at Blackburn. Was it 13 goal involvements? But is he the guy that maintains the midfield? It's the same as like Marcus Tavernier, who looks like he's coming in. It feels like Bournemouth are taking some of the better Championship players, but are those better Championship players good enough for the bottom of the Premier League, who are now signing ex-Champions League level players and players that have been around for a long time consistently playing high-level European football? I don't know. I'm very unconvinced about this Bournemouth side. They still need to get a centre-back in to replace Gary Cahill as well. Dominic Solanke scored 29 goals last season. Does he repeat that again in the Premier League?
I think that's the biggest test for me, is whether Dominic Solanke can be a Premier League striker. Like, we've seen him attempt it so far and probably been unsuccessful, if we're being completely honest. But this is a guy who, obviously, coming up through the academies, was breaking records. He was breaking Champions League Youth Academy records, all of this stuff. He's someone who I think at Cobham they believed he was going to be the best academy product they'd make, and obviously hasn't quite worked out so far. But maybe that season in the Championship and fully being the number 9 for them and integrating himself into that side could be the thing that brings them some success. I mean, I've watched Bournemouth last season in pre-season and was quite I thought the way they were playing football with Scott Parker, and that was quite impressive. The way kind of football he wants to play, but maybe that might be the downside. We saw that with Fulham the season before when he was managing them, that he wanted to still be this progressive manager, playing with the ball, dominating possession when he can, and then sometimes when you're in a relegation battle, you can't really afford to do that.
Yeah, and like Marcus Tavernier, when he comes in, if he comes in for, what was it, 10 million fee being mooted, it's a solid signing. I was very impressed with his partnership alongside Johnny Howson last season, and I think it's fine. For a top level Championship side, it's fine, but to cut it in the Prem is different level. The keeper, I think, what's his name, Travers, obviously he won Player of the Year, Supporters Player of the Year, Players Player of the Year, 20 clean sheets, and for your goalkeeper to be Player of the Year, and to be that good, also slightly concerns me coming up to the Premier League. But I don't know. I'm very unconvinced about Bournemouth. I think so far the business is a bit of a miss.
Yeah, I'd say so as well.
Should we move on then to Brentford? Pato, talk to me about Brentford, because we might have slightly disagreeing opinions on them, because you're a little bit hotter than I am.
I think Brentford are a good side. I think their manager is a really intelligent guy. When they came
There's
up,
no denying that. I agree with that.
When they came up, one of the difficulties we see is that teams that come up from the Championship, where they've dominated the ball, been a really good passing possession side. They come up to the Premier and they can't do that anymore. And often they really struggle. You know, Scott Parker, you mentioned it there. Like, he's a guy who was playing a certain style in the Championship, and that just won't wash in the Premier League because teams can take the ball away from you and keep it. And Frank, I think, really adapted to that well. He created a side that was hitting on the break really well early in the season, that was able to spring and Burmo and use Tony as much more of a kind of creative pivot rather than as like a out-and-out goal scorer. I think there's enough talent here and there's enough intelligence in the coaching that they'll be fine. I think there are worse sides coming up, like Bournemouth are going to be worse. I have my doubts about both of the other sides, to be honest with you.
We'll get onto that.
I worry about teams like Southampton. I don't know. I think that they've got a good system that they know. I think they're going to keep all their key players, or it looks that way certainly at the moment. I think they're going to strengthen as well. Like, they've got Christensen through the door. It looks like they might get Hickey as well. You know, like trying to get Hickey at the moment off Bologna, though I don't know how much of a difference maker he is currently. Wow. You know, because his numbers are not great in Italy. It's more that he's playing a lot in Italy that's impressive, right? I don't know. I'm kind of okay about Brentford. I think Brentford played last season. Actually, if you look at them in aggregate, they played like a mid-table Premier League side. Sure. I don't think there's much reason to think that they're going to sink far enough to get in real danger unless they get a super significant injury, like, say, a Norgard injury, which would be a disaster. But I still think there's more business to come here as well. Ericsson's out the door. They're linked with getting Ben Rama back.
That's a huge problem, I think.
Yeah, but I don't think it's that difficult to solve. Like, you lose Ericsson. Okay, Ericsson was good for them. Like, he's a really good progressive. He wasn't incredible for them.
Mate, he created the third most chances in the league over his spell there at Brentford.
But I think that actually Brentford have a system which means that they do create chances. And
they weren't creating chances before that.
But I think if they get in, say, someone like Ben Rama, I actually think they'll be fine. I'm not sure I'd go back in for Ben Rama, but I think they're getting a decent quality attacking midfielder is actually not that hard at the moment. I think there are good options to be had around Europe. If you want an attacking midfielder, there are always players to be had.
Juan Mata.
Yeah, get into Juan Mata. You know, you kind of look at that and you think, I could see how this would work.
I just want the Ericsson factor. I think my head is being really swayed by those 8 losses in the build up to his arrival, where it felt like teams had figured out what they were doing with Tony dropping slightly deeper and Burma working off the back of him. And then Ericsson's arrival allowed Tony to get into the box, and that's where he operates at his best. And, you know, I just worry that they're not going to be able to find a player of that calibre. And that's fine. They don't necessarily need to find a player of that calibre because Ericsson's probably a top 6 footballer, right? And I think they're going to be fine in the league, sort of anywhere like 15th to 12th sort of position, but I do think there might be a slight step back, just that second season syndrome.
I think if you're a Brentford,
I'm unconvinced about the business so far, but then Brentford's business is never known. Like, players arrive from fucking Midland, and you're like, who's this? It's not great, and then they're amazing. So.
I think if you're a Brentford fan as well, and your second season's being, you know, challenging for 13th, 14th, like mid-table, solid state,
I mean, they finished 13th, didn't they? So.
You'd happily take that, and then you can look on to maybe progress maybe the season after and go from there. But so far, I guess. Miss so far in the window?
They haven't signed him. Well, they got one signing for the door, but they are inevitably going to
give it a couple
of
weeks. It could be, by the end of the window.
All right, Brighton finished 9th last season, pretty solid, but some ups and downs. Obviously, there was the moments where Graham Potter was being booed by Brighton fans. One of the most ridiculous moments of the entire season. Brighton fans in the stadium that did that should be ashamed of themselves, and they are losing players slowly. Team is just... Ben White went last summer, didn't replace him. Obviously, they brought Duffy back and he was okay. Basuma's gone to Tottenham. It's going to be a big replacement. Marco Correa is on his way, or seemingly to Manchester City. It's a big player to replace. They've got to start doing some business and spending some money, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they are... If they are losing Cucurella and they lose Basuma, like, the only other guy kind of that you're looking that could be taken is Lamptey at right wing back. But I guess he's always quite injury prone at the moment. Yeah, and their rumours so far and who they're bringing in aren't necessarily too exciting in my opinion. Like, no,
they don't necessarily have to be though, do they? If you're Brighton,
no. But I think if you're replacing someone like Basuma so far, and you're not even he's been so integral to the way they've played over the past couple of years, and he's obviously been a player as well that's playing above the level of a Brighton. Like, he deserves this move to Tottenham Hotspur or whatever it might have been. Like we'd said United and Arsenal previously, and so at the moment it's a miss with the transfer window so far.
I agree, but like I think it probably will be fine because actually Brighton always have a bunch of players out on loan. Like they buy players
second most, don't they?
They buy players from Poland and Japan, really specifically, are two markets they target, and then they loan them usually to Belgium, right? Because they know that those players need to get their work permits, and it means that by the time that normally a year or two after they buy those players, they start to get integrated into the squad. So they've got some guys they can bring back. But they kind of do what Brentford do. They just pluck guys out of obscurity. And in fairness to them, they got Mwepu last summer knowing that Bissouma was probably going to go.
Yeah.
Bissouma was not that integral to them this season relative to how he has been the last couple of years.
Not as integral as Cucurella.
Like, he didn't play like every minute like Bissouma this season. Cucurella is an issue, but at least with Cucurella, you just signed him. You are going to get a king's ransom for the guy. And are you going to get a replacement of his quality? Probably not. But could you get somebody...
Maybe they go and get Hickey.
Sure. Brighton can do things like that. I think Brighton will go and take 2 or 3 interesting kind of gambles. The bigger issue is that if I were them, I'd be like, we can gamble a bit at left wing back. We can get in like a defensive midfielder of some kind who can pass a bit, because they should probably get 1 or 2 of those, in my opinion. And then I would say, where we want to go for proven quality is up front.
Is in the box.
Let's get
in the box.
Because also, you know, like Mope now has a year left on his contract. Trossard has a year left on his contract. They need to be doing some here. Like so if I were them, I'd think, okay, these are the places we take a few gambles, and maybe rather than like going for like this particular player, we maybe get 2 or 3 and see who hits. But striker, I think
you need a guarantee.
I think they potentially need to think about a centre back as well. I think when when they lost Webster to that injury last season, you saw the results fall away pretty quickly. And without him, the central defensive area, especially having sold Dan Burn in January, looks an awful lot thinner. So I think potentially a centre back, a left back, a centre mid is needed. Striker, they bought in Julio.
Quite a lot of positions.
They bought in Julio Enciso, haven't they? But he's only 18. You know,
it's
like very unproven in European football. Obviously, he's been playing in the Paraguayan top flight. Highly rated, but nobody knows too much about him.
If you're Potter, though, now, and you're like, okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, that's about 4 different positions we've mentioned there.
It might just say Moises Caicedo has a bigger role, though. Towards the end of the season, Moises Caicedo looked fantastic. He was the best player on the pitch against United.
He actually was very good.
Yeah, and a load of their players, that's been true. You know, like, you see a guy like you'll be watching Brighton, you'll be like, who the fuck's this Alzate guy? And then like towards the end of the season, you'll be like, oh, okay. Like, and Mwepu at the beginning of the season, we were like, is this guy ever going to play? And towards the end of the year, like had some unplayable moments, especially in big games. But I mean, I think as well with Brighton, they can afford to keep their powder dry to an extent for later in the window. So for instance, like Chelsea's defence, who knows what's going to happen with it? But it might be that later in the window, Chelsea have managed to get a couple through the door, and you can pick up Levi Colwell, or you could pick up Chalobah on a loan, which might be kind of it. Like, you could see Chalobah going in and playing that right centre-back role.
Ampadu's a versatile player.
Exactly. Those sorts of things. Brighton are the kind of team who can say...
It is very early on in the window.
You know what? We can actually wait, and probably some guys will come available. You know, like, maybe Garner goes back to Man United, and he doesn't... Ten Hag's like, realistically, you're not going to play for me this year, and you can pick up someone like that.
Yeah.
So if I were Brighton, I wouldn't be too worried, because they'll be okay. You know, like, when you see them playing guys like Solly March, they're fine. They're fine. Yeah. They're not at their top level, but they're fine. Solly March is a good player. Like, I think that they can afford to wait.
Yeah, and they've also got Graham Potter.
That's my only thing.
The defining factor. Right. They've still got him.
If you're Potter, you're just not getting annoyed again. Like, I've got to...
No, because
it's sort this out again and got to do this again.
It's taken him years to build this philosophy at a club where he is the all-powerful guy. Like, they've lost Dan Ashworth. There's going to be a heavy reliance on Graham Potter's philosophy and coaching methods. And whenever a player comes in, he can fit them into a role. It's taken him a long time to build that. I don't think he's that bothered.
And they play the way he wants. And
exactly.
And you get the sense from Brighton that they are a happy club. Like, you get this sense from them that like the players generally like pull together, that like young players know they're going to get a fair shake, and that people really want to play Potter's way, and they know that. Like that, and some of the players who they've developed are phenomenal. Like what they've done with Lamptey, obviously. Sanchez is a great goalkeeper. Like, they do make these discoveries. And Cucurella, like, Ben White goes, okay, is it sad? Yeah. 50 million, probably above market value. Cucurella goes, I imagine they'll get a similar price.
Yeah.
Like, these are
above market value.
These
definitely.
are huge sales.
That they can really do 35 as well, I think.
I think
we'll
it's 25 million.
I think
that's below market.
That is below market price.
With 1 year left on your one left.
I think that's below market
it's 35 value. With add-ons.
Like, I think that is.
If it's that, then maybe.
Yeah, from what I've read, it's 25 million quid, and it's, I think, is cheap for a player of his quality.
Though, of course, there are like different questions around Basuma, and I'm not sure that I'd be particularly sad to see the back of him if I were the Brighton hierarchy. I think that they'll just move on the same way they moved on from White. I don't think they shed a tear.
Yeah, but you can't sit there and if a player leaves and just mope around.
I think
some clubs do that.
No, exactly. Yeah, no,
I
you're
think
not
Moises
wrong.
Caicedo and Mwepo, they'll be pretty happy with who they've got in. Let's go to Crystal Palace next then, who finished 12th last season. Had a bit of an up and down season under Vieira, but it was a season of absolute turmoil, wasn't it, at the start anyway, because they had so many players coming in, so many players going out, and I think Vieira, by the end of it, did a really good job to manage that side and what was a lot of work in the transfer window, put a pretty clear brand of football together and an 11 that you kind of know what it is. How do we think they're going to deal with the Conor Gallagher exit? Do you think they sign a player in there, or do they just play Eze in that role?
To be honest, when I spoke to Palace fans at the end of it, like, they weren't necessarily heartbroken about.
He only scored 2 goals across the course second half of the season.
Yeah, he had such a great first half of the campaign. Yeah. The second half, it did maybe drop off a little bit, and maybe that's just through obviously playing so much more and playing in a better club than West Brom was. But I also think Eze comes in, like, he was injured for so long. Like, Elise didn't actually get that many minutes in the end. Like, they've got more than enough players to kind of replace or.
I still think they need one in there.
The guys they're being linked to at the moment, like, there's still not maybe another midfielder. They do need another midfielder.
They've been linked with Jeraribo at Rangers, which would be an interesting signing. Obviously, scored a fair few goals. Very
important in there.
Very good dribbler. But I think right back is probably the biggest need.
Well, that's where Aaron Wan-Bissaka, the rumours are coming in, right? And
but then you've got, okay, you could. If you end up playing Mitchell and Wan-Bissaka as your fullback pairing, that's a really defensive fullback pairing. Like, because Mitchell is a great one-on-one defender, like Wan-Bissaka, but can do literally nothing else. Like, as in, like, there's nothing. No, it's not criticism. Like, being a great defensive fullback is great, but like, he's not a big passer. He's not creative. He's not a dribbler. He just closes down that wing. But if you do that on both sides, you ask a lot of the guys in front of you. I agree they need a central midfielder. They've been linked to Czech Doucouré, who would be a phenomenal player to get out of Ligue 1, because at the moment, people are saying kind of 20 million for him. He is really fucking good. Like, he's a great ball mover. He's incredibly good at wriggling out of pressure. He's got big defensive numbers as well, like a really promising passer. Profile's kind of a bit like Basuma did in Ligue 1. That would be an interesting signing for them. Or if they wanted to go and try and get, Ibrahim Songare or someone like that, one of these guys, I think that would make a big difference for them. So yeah, right back definitely, centre midfielder definitely. But then you look at the squad and you're like,
it's not bad. I think Odsonne second season will be better than he was first season as well.
Yeah, good squad.
Yeah, AU signed that contract extension. I think there's lots of positives to be had at Crystal Palace.
At least they played under half the minutes last season.
Yeah, exactly. So fingers crossed they can get him injury free this year, because he has had injury problems and he does still have. Well, I was listening to the Athletic podcast a couple of days ago, and apparently does still have the buyout clause in the contract at like 35
they're trying to get him. They're trying to get him to sign a new contract.
Nobody's gone in for.
They're trying to get him a new contract. Let's get him to sign a new contract at the moment, but. We'll see. He's meant to be picking Algeria as well for his international club today. International team.
But he can play for like 4 different
Nigeria, Algeria,
the French under 21s at the moment,
and England.
He's for France under 21s at the moment.
35 minutes.
Let's have
I would absolutely tear your arm off. So
I think that's cheap.
That's phenomenal.
All right, let's move on to Everton then, because this is a club that needs some talking about.
This is
finished 16th last season, of course, and it was a horrendous season, about as bad as it can possibly be for Everton. Pretty much survived on the final 2 days, didn't they, of 2 game weeks of the season. No good at all. And now we see Farhad Moshiri, who has last week, who has last week come out and said, you know what, like, I'm back in the club, like, I apologise for the business that's happened, it's not been good enough. It appears this week he's now willing to sell the club. which is very bizarre. Apparently this comes out of a meeting that he had with Peter Kenyon about the stadium. Obviously the stadium is still going to be being built on Bramley Docks, and Peter Kenyon is one of the financiers behind it, and was kind of in the conversation said to Fahad Mashiri, look, do you want to sell your controlling stake, Fahad? I think the discussions are clearly taking place. I think it's probably become public slightly too early, but it appears like it very much appears like Fahad Mashiri is willing to part with the club, especially in the wake of the Usmanov disaster. Usmanov, one of the key backers of the club, all of his sponsors have had to be removed. He was a business partner of Mashiri. That's not happening now, after obviously Russia invaded Ukraine. There's so much turmoil, and not even just that. They're in such debt.
Yeah,
they've done 100 million loss, 3 years on the bounce now.
Well, the fans were really disappointed that they made an agreement a couple of seasons ago that they wouldn't sign with a betting sponsor again, or they wouldn't put that on their shirt. And then recently they just signed with a brand new one. And the fans, I saw them tweeting everything, very, very disappointed. It was weird. It was very 50-50 with the fans. Some of them were like, well, we need the money, and some of them were like, well, we have better morals than that.
The thing is, they literally do need the money. They do 100 million loss every single season. They spent 1 million last year.
At least some players are off the books this summer, right? Like, because they've needed that for a while. So like Delph is out, which actually is a bit of a pity. Like, he was pretty good.
They need a sale, man.
Like, Siverson's
out.
The
big sale is Richarlison, right?
Yeah, but even Richarlison, people were talking about like 50 mil, and you're like, that's not enough to do it. Like, you can't do a rebuild with that amount of money. And also I just think, like, are you going to get enough through the door to make up for what you lose? Because he pretty much single-handedly dragged them through the season. Well, not
him
being
and
that great.
Gordon was the other fantastic one, but then I also don't see them selling Gordon.
No, but
There's
Gordon
no way you can sell.
But Gordon didn't keep them up. Like, Gordon was a player who you were like, wow, this is a really bright player. He looks like a real player for the
Pickford
future.
Kept them up.
Yeah, but, but he didn't do that much. You know, it wasn't like Gordon got them a bunch of really significant goals in the way Richarlison did. But obviously next season, Calvert-Lewin fitter, that will help. Assuming that happens.
It will. Tarkowski's in the door.
Sure.
I like Tarkowski.
He's their best centre back straight away.
Yeah, 100%. Agreed. So long as but it'll be interesting to see what he plays in, because they do have a history. You know, the Marcel Brands period was a period of let's sign some guys. Don't know if they'll fit. Who knows what we're doing? Don't really care. And Mashiri apologising for how the season went. To me, if I were an Everton fan, I would be like, shut up. No one needs an apology. We need you to understand why this has happened and change things so it doesn't happen again. They don't want an apology. They just want an assurance that the club has learned from what's happened. And it just seems like they never do.
Yeah, Lampard's got a big job in his hands, in my opinion. A big job. Obviously, Dominic Calvert-Lewin coming back is a big win for him. But
small hands, big
towards
job.
the end, though, I would say, towards the end, I think he also started understanding the way he couldn't play we mentioned with Scott Parker earlier as well.
Couldn't play progressive.
He couldn't play progressive football, and he bought
Get the line deeper.
Yeah, he bought into we've got to play a relegation kind of football. We've got to make sure we're trying to scrap for these points. We've got to try and do this, and it'll be interesting to see whether beginning of next season, because again, I reckon you might see Everton bring in a couple of loan moves. I've seen rumours about Billy Gilmore possibly going to Everton in midfield.
It's the most Lampard signing.
No, 100%, it's the most Lampard signing ever. But it's these players. It's these players. I guess to somewhat he already knows and he trusts, because I reckon he has a big say in who they're signing. I mean, Dele Alli probably only came to Everton because of Frank Lampard.
Yeah, but that's not working.
And exactly.
I just despair, man. I despair.
I really don't understand who is. My issue with this now becomes if the takeover is in process, Peter Kenyon is taking over. Is Mashiri going to want to put funds into the club that he's leaving? And if so, how much? Is Peter Kenyon willing to bankroll transfers whilst also financing half the stadium that's being built on Bramley? I think there's a lot of problems there. I think they're going to have to do what they did last year, where they spent $1 million on Damari Gray and players like that. I think they're going to have to be super smart with their money. It's going to have to be loan moves because they've just got none of it.
That's where Lampard can help.
Yeah.
Lampard can go to some of the big clubs and people and say, help us out. He can go to Arsenal and Chelsea and Spurs and say we need players. Can you help us? And definitely. I actually think people are quite inclined to do that. If Chelsea can help him out with players, I think they will. I think with just loanees of guys who are not going to get enough minutes from the big six sides, you can probably build a reasonable side that has a good chance of survival. But if Calvert-Lewin is injured again, I actually really do despair. it's a scary situation for Everton.
Yeah. So we're saying miss overall Everton already.
Yeah.
Talking of despairing, by the way.
This is tough.
Let's jump to Fulham. Who, I mean, I was speaking to Henry Hill. Obviously, you guys know Henry. He is a Fulham fan. I mean, he's still confident, he's still positive, but he also said they need 7 new players, which doesn't strike me as a positive, confident player. Obviously, they've lost Carvalho already for, was it 6 million to Liverpool? And then Liverpool have gone, oh yeah, thanks very much, 6 million. You want Nico Williams? 17 mil. Yeah. Like, it's like peak Liverpool. It's just like ultimate shithousery. Like, there was just no workaround there. They are going to hold you to ransom. They're also interested in Minamino, apparently, to the tune of like 17 million. And Palhinha, who seems like that deal might have been agreed and is progressing a little bit, as well as Solomon, the Shakhtar winger.
Bernd Leno's possibly going there.
Don't mind Bernd Leno. I think Bernd Leno's a good signing.
I think that's quite good.
I don't mind Solomon either. Solomon, when I watched him in the Champions League, was solid. He scored a couple against Madrid.
And he's young, and he's going to cost, what, 5?
I just always worry for any team in general, whether they've come up or whether they're high up in the league, wherever it is, that are making 6 signings that will probably all be starting.
Yeah.
Like, that's where you have to.
I mean,
worry.
Tim Ream needs
it's your only
upgrading.
option.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah.
No,
Tim
for
Ream
sure.
needs upgrading. He played 4,000 minutes last year, the most minutes of any player in the Fulham squad. We saw him last time he was in the Premier League.
Yeah.
It just didn't work.
But look, though, like, I mean, you can say, oh, it's embarrassing, that, like, they're being quoted this price for Nico Williams after selling Fabio Carvalho for this. But 15, 17 million for Nico Williams, probably about fair. Like, looks like a good player, a good young player. Like, they need to, in a way, Fulham have quite a decent situation, I think, because you're like, we just buy young players who might be good enough this season, and if they're not, we'll try and come back up next year.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
it's not really that big. Like, that would be my attitude. I wouldn't really worry.
I mean, they've lost Dennis Adoy, haven't they? He's gone. They've lost Jean-Michel Seri. He's gone.
But Seri was a weird one because considering they need so many players, and Fulham had the option to do an extra year and just decided not to take it.
I mean,
he's 30 years old. Like, he's getting on now.
And I think he was on pretty hefty wages, wasn't it?
And Palhinha, if they've obviously confident on Palhinha, they look like they're going to beat Wolves, and Wolves potentially have shifted their focus onto the other Sporting Lisbon midfielder that I've forgotten the name of, Mateus Nunes, to the tune of about 50 million euros. We will talk about Wolves in a bit, though.
It's interesting.
Make a loan offer for Pepe or something.
I think it's another one, though. It's another loan moves can maybe come in.
But they've got Solomon in the wing, haven't they?
Is Hudson-Odoi going to spend another year?
Harry Wilson had a fantastic season last year, and also this season they're actually going to start Mitrovic.
How many goals? Let's go right now. How many goals does he score next year, Mitrovic, in the Prem?
If he starts,
let's say
11.
he does start 38 games.
11.
That's what he got last year. No, last time in the Prem.
Okay, and he didn't play that. Okay, I can maybe go a bit higher. I'll go 13.
If he was
I reckon he might get more as well.
If he starts, say, like 30 out of 38, I think he'll get like 15, 16.
1 in 2.
Because he fell out with Scott Parker.
He's got all the physical abilities.
Scott Parker.
His issue, and I've always thought Marco Silva is a slightly underrated coach. I actually think he's fine. I think Mitro is a problem.
I'd like to think
he's a big guy.
I reckon 12.
In my predictions, I'd like to maybe think they survive through Mitro. Yeah, through Mitro. All of his goals last season, came from inside the box. He didn't score one goal outside the box.
He's fucking massive.
Fulham have just got a lot of business to be done with players leaving and players. I don't know. I'm not particularly hot on Fulham. I think as we said earlier, the promoted teams I think are really going to struggle this year. But having said that, Bernd Leno Solomon Palhinha kind of like the interest in Nico Williams, but. Good luck to him. I hope they do well.
These are hits. It's just the question of whether it's a big enough hit to keep him in the league.
Yeah. Leeds then. Obviously finished 17th last year, surviving on the final day of the season. But Jesse Marsch had only had six games, 7 games, something like that, after they sacked Marcelo Bielsa. And they've done business early, which is always a good sign. Rasmus Christensen, Brendan Aronson, Mark Rocker through the door, and we're not even in July.
Committed to Jesse.
That's what I meant.
I
kept thinking Christensen had gone to Brentford, but I think it's because they were competing, weren't they?
Yeah,
someone else.
Yeah, but they're very much committed to these are all from Marsh's team, suggestions, right? Obviously he's had experience with some of them as well. He knows what they are. So Leeds buying into him shows commitment, obviously, to him as a long-term manager, which is pretty good. But whatever, to be honest, they just needed signings. It got to a point last season where they were having injury after injury. It was people.
Surely it can't be that bad again, can it?
It can always get worse. It can always get worse
so
in
many
football,
injuries,
to be
but
honest.
they had the whole spine out. When Cooper got injured, then Phillips got injured, Bamford got injured.
It was rough.
But Cooper's going to be back. Aronson looks like a real top level signing for a team like Leeds.
Bamford could be fit as well.
Rasmus Christensen, they've pinched off Dortmund. That deal seemed to be agreed and wrapped up, and that's somehow collapsed, and they've got him through the door probably because of the Jesse March factor. Rocker's a bit an unknown. He hasn't played much football in the last couple of years, so how's he going to do since he's left Espanyol? But losing Calvin Phillips, who is the hub of everything that happens in that side, is a big blow.
Yeah, but you're not losing 3,000 minute Calvin Phillips. You're losing 1,500.
But when they were good, you were losing 3,000.
Sure, but
Phillips.
I think that if he goes, they're going to get so much money that it doesn't really concern me, because I think they will do something. They're not going to sit on 50 mil if they get it for Calvin Phillips.
They've got to get it back.
They're going to turn it around and get at least two guys probably. So that's kind of all right. Like if they go out and get a striker and a defensive midfielder, not a central midfielder, then I'm not too worried. I actually think Marsh did quite an impressive job. In the second half of that season.
And they were trialling a few of their academy products towards the end. Who's the guy?
Joe Gelhardt's a fantastic
Gelhardt was
player.
fantastic. They were even playing Lewis Bate towards the end of the midfield.
Somerville's still there as well.
They've got they're hopefully building a decent squad that can deal with the Premier League minutes.
I still think they need a striker.
Yeah. It's hard to rely on Bamford. They were
apparently very confident of signing Nketiah before the 5-game run that's seen Nketiah take the 14 shirt and sign that new deal. Yeah. So I do think they're in the market for a striker.
Rodrigo as well towards the end of the season. Again, just a bit stinky, isn't he? It's not quite worked out. But maybe, again, fitness-wise, might hopefully... if they can keep Bamford fit next season...
They've got to get Gelhardt in that team.
Be the key.
They've got to get Gelhardt in that team. He's so good.
Yeah, so far, I'd say that it's been a hit.
Hits. It's better than
you'd like to think maybe they get one, maybe two more signings through the door.
To get Aronson, Rasmus Christensen, Rocker for a similar sort of fee as they paid for Dan James, I think is decent business, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think they could go and get someone like Breuer on loan, and they'd be kind of.
Oh, that's a great.
He'd run the channels for him.
That'd be really interesting.
That's a great move. Let's go to Leicester then, who somehow finished 8th. One of the great mysteries of last season, where we were toasting them every single week. They were just all over the place, and they've scratched their way to 8th. They have lost Lee Congerton, haven't they, to Atalanta, the head of recruitment, and they
Is he good?
Well, I don't know.
Was he there before Rodgers?
Yes.
Oh, he wasn't the guy who came in with Rodgers.
Oh, maybe he was.
I thought Rodgers brought him with him
potentially,
and we were like,
whatever his situation before was. He's now gone to Atalanta, and they've replaced him with Martin Glover, who was the head of recruitment at Southampton. But Southampton have said, look, you've spent the last 4 months planning our summer window. You're not going until it's completed. So they won't let him leave the club until the window's closed on August 31st. So he will join up with Leicester.
Oh, that's good. So that'll be Brendan running transfers, will it?
So it's Brendan and a transfer committee.
Can't go wrong.
And the Athletic are saying they want 6 in, 6 out.
Well, Tielemans is going.
List the 6 here. They've said very much up for sale is Yuri Tielemans, Jose Perez, fairly unsurprisingly, Hamza Chowdhury, who seems to be in talks with West Brom, non-police Mendy, Bertrand, Soyuncu, Vestergaard, and most surprisingly for me, very keen to get rid of Boubakary Samare.
Well, 2 players they brought in last season.
Yeah, well, Vestergaard's been a mitigated disaster,
for sure,
hasn't it? So clearly that's fair enough. But a couple of names in there. Soyuncu, I'm a bit surprised, but I know he had a down year, but at least it's cover. And Samare's only been there 12 months.
And the season before, his first season in the Prem was a success. Soyuncu.
They need to get Fofana back fit.
But those are just unnecessary moves, aren't they? Like when you've already got a complicated summer coming up.
Yeah.
Why add a couple of sales and purchases that you just don't need to make? Like keep Sumare and keep Soyuncu and just be like, well, let's hope next season, with Ndidi playing more, it'll be kind of fine. Because it just makes the summer more difficult. And clearly they've already got a difficult summer. But that sounds like they need 2 or 3 central midfielders.
Yeah, centre mids is going to be serious.
Well, Tielemans is the number one. Replacing Tielemans is arguably impossible at times for them. That's such a tough transfer to get right, especially.
You've got to eventually think about.
And also, everyone knows they need a centre mid now. Everyone knows they need a key centre mid to replace him, and so the price of one of them go up an extra 15 million euros just for him.
I remember Hamill tweeting at the start of last season. It was do you remember that infamous Chris Hamill tweet? Put it up on screen now. It was Boubakary, Samare, and who else did they sign last summer? And Daka, for combined blah blah, showing Arsenal how to do business or something like that. It was, I can't remember the exact wording. We'll put it up on screen. I just wonder this season whether they might go slightly more sort of
safe.
than the Leicester that we've seen in the past that have like taken some shots at Leipzig and taken some shots at Belgium and stuff like that. I think they might go a little bit safer this season because Tielemans is a massive factor in that team to replace, and also they might have to eventually start thinking about replacing Kasper Schmeichel, who is
Jamie Vardy
consistently kind of falling back. But at least they've got Iheanacho, they've got Daka through the door. Whereas Schmeichel, you think, okay, Henderson's been on the market now, didn't take him. Like Nick Pope is currently on the market right now, haven't taken him. Like Schmeichel's still obviously the captain of the club, so they aren't going to replace him right now.
Had his worst season last season.
He's falling back year on year. He is falling back year on year. So. What do we think?
Well, it's a miss so far.
Any midfielders that you two would shout out straight away that you think could slot in as a Tielemans replacement?
If they look, Lima's got a year left in his contract. Conrad Lima. I mean, again, I know it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, apparently Chelsea won him, Bayern won him,
Man
United won him.
They,
But we've heard about guys like Amadou Haidara hasn't gone anywhere. Like,
oh god,
I think these are players. If you really want to be punchy, go to Napoli and say you've got a year left on your deal for Fabian Ruiz. No one seems to be in for him. We'll give you like full boat. I don't think they'll get him. But these are things they can try.
Yeah.
I just don't really know. They need a guy who can cover for Ndidi or play with Ndidi. That's a difficult position to recruit for. Is. Get Torreira off Arsenal actually as a backup. That's not the worst idea. Just as a squad player.
That's falling apart, doesn't it? Anyway, so that move to
Fiorentina.
Oh, it has, because it looks like Fiorentina getting Grealish. But something like that, I really don't know.
Yeah, it's tough for Leicester.
They're troubling,
especially when you're losing your head of. Scare recruitment as
well. Already gone to Atalanta, so we'll see what happens there. Let's talk about a team that have got a new head of. I think he's director of football technically, isn't he? In Dan Ashworth, Newcastle. He's fully in charge now. He's at the wheel, supporting Eddie Howe, who took the 6th most points in the league from his takeover date to the end of the season. Reportedly having a budget of between 60 and 80 million pounds this summer. So not huge money given the new owners, but I think they want to kind of gradually ease it in. They don't want to just chuck 300 million in there and waste it all. And I kind of like the names they're being linked with. I think, Matty Targett, not the most progressive player, but a very safe pair of hands at £12 million. Definitely. And I think there are other areas in the squad that have greater need for bigger funding. So you know what you're getting with him. He's worked with Eddie Howe for the last 6 months. He formed a really nice partnership with Dan Burn on that left-hand side and was very solid. I don't think there's anybody quibbling over £12 million for Matty Targett when they were being quoted 30 mil for Lodi. Like, probably a superior player, but do they need to spend 30 million on a left-back? Probably not. When, they might be able to get Botman through the door for a similar fee. And that...
Fantastic
if it happens, it's a good sign.
It'd be ridiculous.
It's a really good sign.
I mean, the idea that they're challenging with Serie A champions AC Milan, who are playing in the Champions League next year.
But it's wages, right, that comes down to. Because I think if there were two on the table, he would pick AC Milan. He didn't move in January because he wanted to go to Milan. If Newcastle got the wage structure there, that's the reason he's going.
Even like Bruno Guimaraes, like the way you look at when you watch Bruno's interviews now, like he is so bought into the Newcastle. He absolutely loves it over in Newcastle, and so like the squad that they could have at the beginning of the Premier League could be ridiculous compared to what they had at the beginning of last. Premier League.
Think as well. There's a massive upside of now having Callum Wilson back fit, where Callum Wilson missed so much of the season. I think he's such a good player.
But is he again? But how fit is Callum Wilson going to be every season? Like,
and he's obviously not going to play loads of games. But in the second half of the season, they only really had him fit for the last 2 or 3 fixtures under Eddie Howe, and I think he's so good.
Against Arsenal,
he's so good, especially under Eddie Howe, who has worked with him before at Bournemouth. Comparatively to Chris Wood, I think it's a massive upgrade. And obviously they've got potentially Hugo Ekitike coming through the door. I don't know loads about him. Obviously, he had some fantastic numbers, sort of some of the best numbers in Liga and last year for a player of his age. So, seems like an exciting player. What about Moussa Diaby? Because Moussa Diaby is being heavily linked. Again, I don't know loads about him, Pat. Anything you can add for Moussa Diaby?
But I don't... The budget you said, they can't do all this.
Yeah, £50 million is what they're being quoted for Moussa Diaby.
But if they've already spent 12 on Target, they end up spending say 25 on Ekitike,
30 on Botman.
30 on Botman. They don't have any left. They have nothing left. They can't make any sales because no one wants any of their players. Right, so I doubt they'd get him in that position. But it might look. Ekitike is a really good target because insane numbers. I mean, like not young, insanely young. But when you do have Wilson and Wood, not necessarily a position of need, so I probably would try and go for Diaby instead. Because Moussa Diaby has had an amazing season. And Leverkusen kind of do this. They do juice their forwards numbers. But he has taken a real, like, star-making step forward. Huge dribble numbers, historically. Great creative numbers. Big goal threat. Can play on both sides. Really hard-working as well. I think this would be frightening. Like, to have him and Saint-Maximin in attack, either side of Wilson, this is probably something I'd prioritise, maybe even over... I'd certainly prioritise it over Ekitike. I'd maybe even consider prioritising it over Botman, just because I think that this is more of a difference-making signing, as much as they need Botman.
And defensively, towards in the second half of the season, I thought they weren't too bad with Dan Burn and Shaw. I didn't think they were too terrible.
I think it's an upgrade to be had, though. I also,
of course, but if you're prioritising...
I do think as well that... Newcastle fans shoot me down for this every time. I think goalkeeper is an area to be improved, and I do think if Nick Pope is on the market, Newcastle should be signing Nick Pope.
It's just not. Yeah, but if your budget is that, then you can't do everything.
But if you could do Botman, Pope, Ekitike, and Matty Target, I think that's an amazing summer. But
then Saint-Maximin gets injured. Where's your creativity coming from? Who's your skill in the wide areas? Are you playing Almiron and Fraser wide? Like, what have you got?
You have to go a bit more solid, don't you? You have to adapt.
Because they were really solid over the back half of the season. Yeah. But you've got to bear in mind as well that teams will get used to playing Newcastle. Newcastle have not invented the kind of stodgy midfield high press. Teams will work out how to play around it, or Bruno will get injured. And then you're kind of in trouble.
Respect Joe Linton, mate. Respect Joe Linton.
I like Joe Linton, but he's not a game controller and he's not a creator.
Yeah. Okay, but overall, we kind of like Newcastle's.
These are great. These are
great. They're the right names they should be targeting, not bloody Neymar. Do you know what I mean? It's just
when it was they're going to offer Arsenal 50 million for Kieran Tierney, who cannot stay on the pitch.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go to the third of our promoted
I worry for these boys.
This is grim.
I worry.
Yeah, Nottingham Forest.
Time.
I mean, since Steve Cooper took over, obviously took the most points of any side in the Championship, more than Fulham.
Who cares?
But I was literally, the next words out of my mouth is I'm worried for them. I think he's a bit of a magician, Steve Cooper, but you've got to be more than a magician given the players that are out the door. Bryce Samba, fourth most minutes in the squad, comfortably one of the best keepers in the Championship. Suddenly goes, I want to leave. I want to leave. I don't understand it at all, given that he's spent 4 years there and he's finally got to the promised land and he's gone, take me back to Lens. What's gone on there? Jed Spence is going back to Middlesbrough, who will then sell him to Tottenham 100%. James Garner's gone back to United. Keenan Davis has gone back to Villa. Zinkenagle's gone back to Watford. We're talking here about the 4th, 6th, 7th, 8th most minutes in the squad. 5 players gone. That is a disaster.
Yeah.
And the guys that will come into, the ones that are in the squad that replace them at the moment are nowhere near the level.
Well, Dean Henderson would be a good sign for them. Great sign.
Yeah, sure. I meant
especially as a loan up front.
I meant more so the sub goalkeeper they've got at the moment. It's rough, and they don't have a huge budget either. To go and sign these players. They're going to have to rely on loans again. They're going to have to be messaging United, being, can we have Garner back
because
on loan again?
They'll be taking Dean Henderson on.
Yes. Well, yeah, precisely. Yeah, they can't do both. They can't do both.
Same club.
Yeah, that's why it's out of all of them, even more so out of Bournemouth and Fulham, Forest are the ones that I do.
Musa Niakate also seems close. Don't know anything about him. 26-year-old centre back from Mainz.
Fine. Do it.
But they just need so much cover. They've got to get Zinkenagel back. Got to try and get Zinkenagel back, surely, because he was so crucial to that team.
But do Watford, who have now gone down, loan back a player that's to a Premier League club? Do you not keep him into the Championship and do that unless they're going to try and buy him flat out?
Jed Spence, Pat, you're not quite as hot potentially as the most on him.
If you look at his numbers last season, they aren't very good in any particular regard.
When you watch him, he's a good player.
He's quite exciting to watch, but I also think I'm more inclined to give credit to Cooper in that regard. Don't get me wrong, obviously you need a certain amount of ability to do it, but Forest really will kind of suck the game into the centre of the pitch and then spring their wing backs in wide areas. So I do think that if you've got an athletically talented wing back with decent kind of final ball, I think that Cooper will find a way to maximise that player. And I think that could translate quite well to the Premier League. Understanding that you're not going to have a huge amount of possession, but creating opportunities such that when you do get the ball, you can make the most of it. I think that that's probably quite wise. And I do think that they can probably get a lone guy in who can do a similar kind of role.
Do you?
Okay, is it sad that he's gone? Sure. but he's not like a world-altering star. Like, he's a prospect. He's a good prospect. And also, there's as much as we're saying like they're going to have to go and get loans, Cooper has clearly shown an ability to develop players.
Yeah,
if I were looking to loan my players out, I would look at Steve Cooper and think, this guy is a really safe pair of hands. We can definitely do business with him. Obviously, it's different, like with a team who are kind of like flying up the Championship and a team that might just like drop out the Premier League.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to stay up. But I think they can replace him.
And I do think it's going to be rocking.
Colback worries me.
This ground's going to be rocking in Nottingham.
Oh, the fans are
like
love
across
it,
the first few games of
course.
the season, especially that place is going to be an absolute cauldron to go to.
Yeah.
I don't know who's
And so
going
it
there
should
early
be.
doors.
And Forest make it tough. Like when you play against Forest, they make it tough. Like it's not a fun game. Like
100%. Every time watching the cup last year,
it
it was brutal, mate.
Yeah, but none of those players are there.
No,
It's going to be like, how tough are their academy players going to make it?
I do. When I went to Wembley as well for the playoff final, they didn't play particularly well. They got the job done. Obviously, Huddersfield, I thought, should have had pens on the day and were poor. But the atmosphere, the Forest fans are insane. So I really hope they do well, but I agree. I just think that there's too much work to be done in that squad because of the loan moves and the loan situations. So I do worry for them.
A real throwback to have them in the league, man.
Yeah.
Just makes me think of the kind of Van Hooijdonk days.
Yeah, 100%. Let's do the last three sides then. Southampton.
Do you want to take this one? I feel like for some reason, I guess it's because you went to uni there, but I feel like you
Joe's
are the
always had a
Southampton
little,
expert.
yeah. Joe's always had a little.
No, I do like
soft spot for
Southampton. Yeah, maybe it is because I went to uni there. Southampton have got problems. They've got real problems behind the scenes. Obviously, they've had the takeover complete now, and for a number of years now, they've had terrible ends of the season. They tail off like no club you've ever seen. They won 1 in 13 at the back end of the season, and ended up slumping to 5 points clear of relegation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of time to shit or get off the pot if you're Southampton. Either back Hasenhüttl or get rid of Hasenhüttl. They've sacked 3 of his first team coaching staff members, and obviously that's not to say that Hasenhüttl has been pulled in and gone, no, you're safe, but we're getting rid of all of them. I think it's a wider remit and redevelopment of the backroom staff, and it's probably needed to happen for some time now because Southampton have gone stale. They've gone stale behind the scenes. They've gone stale in the recruitment. They've gone stale in the coaching. And to some level, I think Hasenhüttl needs some fresh eyes on the training ground and potentially behind the scenes just to give him a different perspective. Because he's not had a assistant manager in that position since, Johnny Dyle left in 2019. So 3 years ago, he hasn't been replaced. I think they need those new coaches. Probably not all 3 of them are going to come in, but they need to replace them with maybe 1 or 2, which I don't know who they're going to be. But overall, they both need to get coaches through the door, and they need to start spending some fucking money because their net spend across the last, I think, 4 or 5 seasons is like 20 mil. Like, how can that happen? Burnley's was 55 million. Some of the promoted sides is like upwards of 100 million. And Sheffield, and we're talking about Southampton, who've been in the division for a long time now, 22 million pounds. Spend some money. Back your man. If you don't want to back him, get rid of him. Like, make a decision. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens because the new owners are obviously an analytics-based company. They are the guys that basically focused on bringing Brentford up the divisions, and it worked very successfully, and they're using Southampton as a flagship property to invest in other clubs as well. They're going to buy a load more clubs. They're going to, hopefully, for Southampton fans, get some sort of structure behind the scenes because it's been miserable behind the scenes there for a while.
The thing is as well, we're not even seeing Southampton use like the academy that they once used to bring so many players through and continue to
that level,
to the level. Like when you in one season you'd see them have 3 different starters from the academy. Nowadays it's just not happening.
It looks like their new kind of tact is to go to other teams' academies and say, okay, who's in your academy that's real top level and isn't going to get minutes, we'll buy it. And we'll give you a buyback. Tino Livramento, prime example of that, obviously was the best academy player at Chelsea, according to the Chelsea coaches,
injury,
and was picked up by someone. Obviously, unluckily had an ACL problem, but he was top start of the season, Tino Livramento. And I think they're clearly going to try and do that with other players. We've seen Gavin Bazunu come through the door, £12 million, one of the highest rated young keepers in the league. Manchester City don't want to lose him, but go, okay, you can go and get minutes there, but we want to buy back. And I think it's probably how Southampton are going to operate under this new ownership structure. You know, they're also interested in Romeo Liver at Man City, who's in similar sort of position to Gavin Bazunu, where very highly rated, not going to get any minutes. Can we sign him, give him a buyback? That is going to be their kind of structure going forward. Fine, but they've also got to do some work to the first team, like in the immediate, because they've got players there that have sat there for years on big contracts. Theo Walcott, players like that, you know, either sell him or cancel the contract at this stage, pay it up and get him out of the books, because for years now they've sat on players that have been there earning big money and not played at all. Like, make a decision. They're just not making enough decisions.
And also next season, like Brozier's gone back to Chelsea on loan. Like he had a very, I think maybe Brozier got a little bit overrated in the end. Like I think he had a very good start towards his career in the Premier League, and then towards the end of the season it kind of tailed off. And so, but they've got a striker position they've got to fill now, like that, and he's got to be decent, because not many of their Southampton players are chipping in with goals.
Yeah, and they've got to find a way of scoring goals that isn't Ward-Prowse set pieces. Ward-Prowse creativity from deep. Like they've got to find a alternate way, and they've also got to plug the bleeding at the back. Like Tino Livramento, fantastic season. Salisu, really good season. You know, Kyle Walker-Peters into the England side, and they're still leaking goals. Like they've got to find a way of plugging that back line, and unless they spend well and smart, I worry again for Southampton. I think it'll be another low Premier League finish.
Another miss at the moment, transfer-wise.
Yeah, at the moment for me. West Ham then, obviously finished 7th. They could have finished 6th on the final day, but they lost to Brighton. Pat, what are your thoughts on this West Ham side? David Moyes building Everton 2.0 by the looks of it, and is now interested in James Ward-Prowse, which I just don't see happening.
I wouldn't do that.
Well, he signed a 5-year contract 6 months ago.
Jesus. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't do that. It looks like they're going to get in the centre back, Agüerd.
Yeah, forget.
Sure, like that's fine with me. Like, do something like that by all means. If they're happy to let Ben Rama go and they get some money back for him, then that's obviously fine as well.
Putting that in Lingard, aren't they?
They're going to be fine. I think they'll have a tougher season this year, because I think teams like Leicester will probably have a resurgence to some extent. Man United can't be worse than they were last year. So I think that they'll be okay. I mean, I would get a striker.
Yeah.
Like,
Christ.
They need to do that.
I like Antonio. Good vibes. Not, in my opinion, like he can be improved upon so much.
But he also plays every minute of every game.
Yeah.
And he does always have an injury.
Yeah,
he always has like at least one substantial injury in a season, right?
Yeah, I think he's perfectly serviceable, West Ham, but it's just
so
like, please give him some support. Like, he can't play every minute of every game. And obviously they should be thinking about, you know, Declan Rice is going to leave next summer, surely. Do we get a player in this summer, a bit like Brighton do, where they signed a player like Mwepu and Caicedo in advance of Basuma leaving, so they could bed him into the team. You know, Alex Krall arrived. Did he play a minute? I don't remember Alex Krall playing a minute last year. So I think there's work to be done at West Ham. Clearly they're identifying midfield as an issue. Mark Noble's left the club. They're interested in James Ward-Prowse. They're not going to get James Ward-Prowse. That's just not going to happen. I don't see a world that happens. So yeah, midfield, striker. They've got Agüerd through the door at centre back. I mean, they're going to be fine, aren't they? But they just got a bit of work to do, I think, in the market. Let's do Wolves then, finally, because they finished 10th last year. How do you feel about Bruno Lage, Pat?
I think he did quite a good job keeping them competitive while completely changing the style of play. Obviously, things did not stay as good as they looked at the beginning of the season. But Wolves always have a decent amount of talent. They have a plan for getting more talent into the squad and for progressing it. I think they're going to keep Neves this summer. It looks that way.
What do you think?
Where's he going?
And the rumours about Neves so far have dried up again. Like,
but I just got the feeling he ends up going somewhere. Surely that he doesn't stay at Wolves another
But Barca
season.
can't do it.
And he basically said his goodbyes the other day.
But
He was
Barca
very
can't
emotional.
do
His
it.
last
City
season
don't
was
look like
emotional.
they're interested. Who else is there?
Well, when Frankie de Jong
United
falls apart, he goes to United. Yeah,
sure,
inevitably.
but then at least he goes for a huge sum of money, and they've got some things happening. You know, like just by virtue of guys they've brought through the academy or signed in the past, which may help. Like, so Morgan Gibbs-White comes back after a phenomenal season.
Great season.
If he comes back and gives them even decent cover for 15 games, then that's a bonus for them. They normally will pick up at least one star out of Portugal, so I'm sure that they'll produce.
Looks like it might be Matheus Nunes.
Yeah, it does. So that might be kind of interesting as well. So I don't know. I never really worry that much about Wolves because I look at them and I think, okay, we can all like laugh at Nelson Semedo having bad games or whoever it might be, but these players are still substantially ahead of their rivals at lower mid-table sides, so I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be around mid-table.
Saiss potentially
needs
to
need a
replace
centre back. Saiss played a lot of minutes for them. He was like, he was maybe one of the top ones for them. Played a lot of minutes. They need to get him in. Obviously, they play Cody and Kilman. The name escaped me, so they need to get someone to replace him. And he actually was quite vital. He's been quite vital for them for the past couple of seasons now.
Plays for sure on that left-hand side of the
so
centre
much
back
free. So if they can target a centre back in, get one of them, and maybe they're looking to Portugal for it.
You want Eric Bailly?
Too surprised.
Do you want Eric Bailly? Anybody want Eric Bailly?
Can't play more than 5 minutes, Eric Bailly. So I think that's a position obviously that's desperate, unless they've got someone from the academy they're banking on. You'd assume.
He can speak Portuguese.
He can speak Portuguese.
He can go undercover.
They just call it the Gestafoot, and they go, is it a Gestafoot agency? Yeah, it is. So you've got any left-sided centre backs, and then George Mendes goes, I've got 15 here. Which one do you want?
Tell me to stop.
Names
As I put my finger down. Tell me to stop.
It's perfectly good signing.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, like they're saying at the moment with Portuguese club like Porto are having to sell a lot of players at the moment. Maybe they look into there for it. But overall, like I thought Bruno Lage had a pretty good season. Started really well, probably dropped off a little bit towards the end of the season. Like
the return of Morgan Gibbs White is a big positive. That's a really big positive, and I think he will have an impact next season because I don't think Trincao quite had the impact they're expecting.
But they missed Neto a lot last season. They missed Jimenez like a lot last season. So there are edges to be gained just from people coming back and being fitter.
Well, also Adama Traore.
That's interesting. So I won't be as good.
What is going to happen with Traore?
He's not going to Barca.
Exactly, he's not going to Barca. I haven't really seen any other rumours about him being picked up by anybody else. Bruno Lage towards the end of the season, towards the end of his time at Wolves, before he went to Barca, was benching him most of the time and then bringing him on with 10, 15 minutes to go.
Yeah, and also I don't think...
It's a guy who they could probably get a decent amount of money for.
I don't think they're going to take Trincao, are they? Maybe there's a swap deal to be done there, Trincao for Traore.
I think they didn't really love Trincao in the end. He didn't really set the league alight.
Got a couple of goals towards the end of the season, but I'm not...
Still a young player though, and like I can kind of see you like what you see in Trincao, whereas I think Adama Traore just doesn't suit the way that they want to play. That said, Spurs end up kind of not liking the Jed Spence price, or they can't get the deal over the line. Maybe they go back in for Adama Traore, and I think that probably...
I think Jed will be cheaper than Adama though.
I think probably, but there are also kind of issues going on there, right? So there are rumours about his attitude behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And Adama Traore is a guy that they've wanted for a long time, and I mean, watching him play under Conte, I think everybody wants to see that.
Yeah, that would be really fun. There's absolutely no denying that. And they've also they made Hwang permanent in January, didn't they?
They did.
So they still have him.
That's
in the squad as well, absolutely fine. I think Wolves will be very solid, mid-table side next year. I wouldn't be too worried. I think they do good business, and if Neves leaves and they're replacing with Mateus Nunes, I think Neves will probably go down as like a Wolves legend.
Won't be watching many of their games though.
Surely he goes down as like a Wolves icon.
Neves,
Ruben Neves.
Yeah, Moutinho as well.
Them in the champ.
João Moutinho as well.
The champ, and like seeing them go up and
having
then stay up
captained in the Champions League as a teenager.
Yeah,
and then go there
to take Wolves up to Europa League and stuff.
Oh mate, the fans adore him. Like as you mentioned, his last game of the season, he was quite emotional and he was like clapping. He was clapping everything. It did seem as if it was his last game. But he's also a player that
I'd be surprised
to
see him play
Wolves.
All right, there we go. That was the other 14 teams' business potential analysed across the course of the window. We don't know what's going to happen. So it's very early. Yeah. We might come back to some of these teams if there's any big moves in there. Let us know what you think about the best of the rest in the comments below. Who should be signed for each side? Anything you want to promote?
No,
nice.
Just Patrick.
Good. Yeah.
Thanks,
what about
Patrick.
What are you doing? Do you have a grocery app or something you want to promote?
Not at the moment. But if you would like to sponsor any of us, then get out our emails. I'm sure we'll be happy to do anything for money.
Look at him smiling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sent my taxes yesterday.
Oh dear. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you go and watch We Need to Talk. I was analysing the Chelsea squad, who should stay and who should go. I was getting in contact with Zach for a bit of advice over that, and it's not looking pretty.
I know, it's great.
I said nothing official. Chelsea. Don't sack me.
It is fantastic. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you there. Bye.